Shariko. I'm the Vice President of the Board here at the Jones Memorial Library. I want to welcome you here today for the first of our 6 lectures over the course of the fall into the spring on the board of the Pierce Street Gateway. So I'm very excited that Ghislaine's going to give a talk, and it's our director, Deb Smith, is going to introduce her. But what I wanted to do is not talk about Pierce Street, because that's what Ghislaine's going to do, but I wanted to tell you about our fundraiser that's coming up. The Jazz and Sip is on September 30th. It's going to be at Amazement Square from 5:30 to make sure they get the right time, 5 to 7:30. There is some information about the Jazz and Sip over on the refreshment table. Please consider that. That's our major fundraiser of the year. The goal, of course, is to raise the money to fix up the Callaway store for the purposes that you'll hear about. So that's coming up in a couple weeks. I know there are a lot of galas in the fall in Lynchburg. All of us are realizing that, but I hope you can make some time and find your way over to Amazement Square on the 30th for the Jazz and Sip for the Pierce Street Gateway. I'm going to turn this now over to Deb Smith.
Thank you, Jerry, and I'll be at Jazz and Sip, and I hope to see all of you there. But welcome. This is the first in 6 lectures that we give in our history series every year. So you have on your chair the lineup for the year. I hope you'll be able to put the dates into your calendar and come to all 6. If you can't make it, we do put videos onto our YouTube site, and we let you know on Facebook when we posted a video. And the other way to get information about our programs is to sign up for our e-newsletter, which we send out once a month. If you sign the book in the lobby with your name and your email address, we'd be happy to add you to that list. But it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Ghislaine Lewis, who will be speaking this evening on Reckoning with Remembrance and the Pierce Street Gateway. Dr. Lewis is an Associate Professor of Communication Studies and co-chair of Africana Studies at the University of Lynchburg. She serves as the advisor for both the university's campus newspaper, The Cartograph, and the African Caribbean Union. She teaches classes in Communication Studies, Africana Studies, and in the Masters of Nonprofit Leadership program. She is also director of the Pierce Street Gateway, where she is a founding member of the Pierce Street Community Garden. Dr. Lewis serves on the board of the Blue Ridge Area Food Bank and the Link Project, and on the exhibition committee for the Legacy Museum of African American History. Dr. Lewis's love of travel and passion for the classroom have taken her on adventures around the globe, but sadly we're not going to hear about those tonight. A quick reminder that we will leave about 10 minutes at the end for Q&A, so please hold your questions until then. And thank you, Dr. Lewis.
So, thank you for inviting me to kick off this new season of the Owen Lecture Series. I really am thrilled to be here. So today we're going to talk a little bit about Reckoning with Remembrance. And given some of the conversations we've been having nationally and even locally this evening, I want us to think about how we reckon with remembrance here in Lynchburg. What we choose to remember and what some try to make us forget. I want us to unpack the way Black history is presented, contested, and explored in the city. Since the founding of the American Republic, Black feminists, ministers, organizers, and radicals have emphasized history in their calls for justice. Civil rights activist James Pennington in 1841 said that history is essential to human rights. Pennington understood that Black history's connection to human rights centered on a common truth, that history is about belonging. It serves as a collective memory of our shared past, connecting us to one another as a people. Silences, erasures, and exclusions from that shared past denies membership to the nation. So before we begin, I wanted to give you guys a little bit of context. So I thought I would tell you a little bit about me. I am what you call a third culture kid. So third culture kids are people who were raised in a culture other than their parents or the culture of the country of their nationality, and have also lived in different environments during a significant part of their child development years. So I grew up in the Caribbean, first in Guyana, which is the only English-speaking country in South America, and then in Jamaica. There, I learned about Marcus Garvey and Indira Gandhi and Nelson Mandela and Malcolm X and Stokely Carmichael and Walter Rodney, and how they galvanized their communities towards change. I came to Lynchburg for the first time 22 years ago to go to Randolph-Macon Women's College. And even then, I knew as much as I loved being behind the red brick wall, the only way to fully embrace and understand my new home was to throw myself into the community to figure out what makes Lynchburg tick. And I will admit that some of the experiences, especially as a Black woman in the 03s, were alarming. But I learned names like James Solomon Russell, and Jesse Beasley, and Ann Spencer, and Carl B. Hutchinson, and Hermina Hendricks. All of these people who had amazing, amazing stories to tell. And when I returned to the city 6 years ago to work at the University of Lynchburg, I again engrossed myself in my community. As a journalist, I understand how important it is to be on the ground, to tell the stories of the people who aren't our public figures, to tell the stories of all of the voices who helped to make this city an incredibly special place to live. According to Archbishop Desmond Tutu, we should all do our little bit of good where we are. And so in the classroom and through community service is how I do my little bit of good. It is my way of embracing home and trying to find a sense of belonging. So last year, I stepped into my role as director of Pierce Street Gateway, as Deb said. But as she said, I serve on the board of the Blue Ridge Area Food Bank and with the LINK Project and on the exhibition committee at the Legacy Museum. Now, I've been going to the Legacy since I was in undergrad, so that's literally a part of my DNA these days. So as you can probably tell, a lot of the projects I've chosen to support show how much I'm interested in how Lynchburg embraces Blackness. I've thrown myself into learning all that Lynchburg is and continually learning about all that Lynchburg is and envisioning all that it can be while always focusing on the wonderful work that we're doing at Pierce Street Gateway. And I think this is an important caveat as we delve into our conversation on how we reckon with Remembrance. So, as I previously indicated, I'm a journalist at heart. And for the past few years, we've reckoned with the continued polarization of not just our country, but also our city. And I've been stuck on the Boston Globe columnist, Renee Graham's quote about, she said that Black people should not deny themselves spaces where they find joy and wonder because they're too rare in our lives. Now, she said this in May of 2020, right at the edge of the pandemic, and there was a lot of isolation going on, so who knows where Renee Graham's head was at the moment. But as we think about the everyday stories about belonging in our city, and we think about who is represented, and where and what stories are told, and where and what stories are ignored. I want us for a few minutes to reflect on where do we find the truly multicultural spaces in our community. Where are those spaces where people can find joy and wonder? I think the truth is that Blacks in this country and in this city ration our activities to minimize confrontations. We think twice, and usually more than twice, about whether to enter spaces where we may not be welcomed or at least be left alone. Each offense is an ugly reminder that we live on the precipice of capricious harassment and violence, and the mental, emotional, psychological toll is incalculable. America pressures Black people to conform in order to receive the respect and dignity every human being deserves. It forces Black Americans to engage in an intricate, dehumanizing, humiliating performance in order to enjoy the freedoms supposedly guaranteed by the Constitution. In Lynchburg, that means being strategic about how you present your Blackness. So, there are spaces where Black people can find joy and wonder, and where they show up, or they can show up, or try to show up as their authentic selves. Many of these spaces are in historically Black neighborhoods that come out of the legacy of segregation and redlining. However, as gentrification permeates our community and changes the character of historically Black neighborhoods, it also slowly erodes the immense cultural, historical, and social significance of those neighborhoods. These communities often serve as living repositories for African American history, culture, and traditions. They contribute to a strong sense of cultural identity and belonging. They provide spaces where cultural practices, including music, food, art, and religious traditions, are nurtured and celebrated. They have a history of resistance against racial discrimination and segregation. They have been centers of civil rights activism and social change, and exemplify the resilience of the African American community. They have been home to educational institutions and leaders who have made significant contributions to civil rights and academia and the arts. These neighborhoods serve as economic engines within the Black community, fostering entrepreneurship and business development. They contribute to the economic self-sufficiency of a community and enable job creation. These neighborhoods often feature unique architectural styles and urban planning that reflect their historical development. Preserving this built heritage is crucial to maintaining a sense of place and identity. Historically Black neighborhoods provide inspiration for current and future generations by showcasing the achievements of African Americans. They offer role models and examples of success. These neighborhoods contribute to the collective memory of the Black experience in America. They remind us both of the struggles and the achievements of African Americans in the face of adversity, not diversity. So I'm in no way championing a segregated city. Based on the descriptions I just gave on the importance of the Black neighborhood, I shift our attention to our historically Black neighborhoods here in Lynchburg. And more specifically, this 2-block area of the Pierce Street Historic District that exemplifies Black belonging. Marcus Garvey said that Black power is Black awareness, pride in race, Black institutions with Black leadership, Black economic prosperity, Black unity in the national and international scene. It is against this backdrop and in the midst of a segregated Lynchburg that Pierce Street emerges as a beacon of exceptionalism. Pierce Street was incorporated in 1870 at the end of the Civil War and its annexation from the city, and it became a historic district on August 25th, 2014. The Pierce Street District includes approximately 5 acres of urban residential neighborhood between Lynchburg's College Hill and Kemper Streets areas. It's the smallest historic district in the city, and it's known more for its people than for its architecture. The neighborhood is home to more historic markers concentrated in one 2-block area than any other town or city in Virginia. It is home to notable people who've earned distinction locally, statewide, and nationally in education, literature, aviation, sports, and medicine. It is home to the Ann Spencer House and the Dr. Walter Johnson House and tennis courts. Both are individually listed on the state and national registers. So as you traverse Kemper through 12 streets, we remember that these hollowed spaces served as a Civil War mustering ground for Confederate troops from Virginia under the command of Colonel Jubal Early. As we reckon with this idea of remembrance, we remember that Lynchburg was an important transportation and supply hub for the Confederacy because of its location on the Virginia and Tennessee Railroad and because of the James River. This city served as a major center for manufacturing, including the production of weapons and ammunition. We remember the 130 Southern soldiers who died at the camp's Pratt Hospital and are buried at the Old City Cemetery. We remember the formerly enslaved people who sought refuge there. We remember those who served at the Freedmen's Bureau's Lynchburg Station after the Civil War, providing assistance to the newly freed African Americans. The Bureau provided aid in the form of food, clothing, and medical supplies, as well as helped to establish schools and to provide education for freed people who'd been denied that right under slavery. So as we juggle with this idea of remembrance and representation and belonging, education and achievement are themes that connect many of Pierce Street's luminaries. Some of those notable people include Amaza Lee Meredith, who spent her early childhood on Pierce Street and is considered one of the first female Black architects in the country. Meredith was unable to practice her profession as an architect because of both her race and her sex as an African American woman. And she worked primarily as an art teacher at Virginia State University. But her architectural designs can be seen in Virginia, in Texas, and in New York. Howard University and Columbia University grad Pauline Wheaton Maloney is seen as Lynchburg's First Lady of Education. Maloney taught and served as a guidance counselor and as an assistant principal in the Lynchburg Public Schools. And she was the first Black president of the Virginia School Boards Association. Hampton University grad Amelia Perry Pride taught in Lynchburg Public Schools and served as principal of the Polk Street Colored School. She also helped to support formerly enslaved women who had no family support in their old age through her Dorchester home. Dr. Walter Johnson was the first African American physician to receive practice privileges at Lynchburg General, and in his spare time, he was a noted tennis coach and is credited with helping to desegregate the sport. Educator CWC served as principal for 30 years at Dunbar High School, and he was the first Black faculty member at the University of Lynchburg. While this is just a brief snapshot into the neighborhood's riveting history and the complex lives of these history makers, many of these names are celebrated in the 8 historic markers on Pierce Street, erected through the tireless work of Jane Wright to highlight this neighborhood's legacy. So Pierce Street Gateway hopes to continue and build on the work that Jane has done. We call 1301 Pierce Street home, and this was the site of the Pratt Hospital during the Civil War. Some years after the war, the property was bought by William J. Calloway in 1877. Part of the building was used as a family dwelling and for rentals, while the other part was used as a community grocery store. The Calloway store was one of the first Black-owned businesses here in Lynchburg. Calloway also purchased a property adjacent to the store, Calloway Hall, which is now Wayside Gospel Temple Church of God, to serve as a gathering space and safe haven for his neighbors. As we think about creating community and belonging, we remember the over 150-year collaborative legacy of the Spencer and Calloway families that helped to sustain Pierce Street through Reconstruction, Jim Crow, and even through the Civil Rights era and into the present. When Pierce Street Gateway purchased the Calloway store in 2018, the aim was to keep the legacy of our neighbors alive, to tell the stories of some of the Black people who helped to share shape Lynchburg's history, even when they were excluded. So Callaway Hall, which is the church next door to the Callaway store, was built as a gathering space for the community. And so as we reckon with Remembrance, I really want us to think about the formerly enslaved women that Amelia Perry Pride helped to house for a period at Callaway Hall, and the entrepreneurs who helped to support the people in that neighborhood through their weekly community markets, farmers markets in the neighborhoods. There was a farmers market between Callaway Hall and the Callaway store. So Black culture and museum institutions have often had a negative relationship. Historically, this has included the theft of cultural objects, the appropriation of styles, and the devaluation of skilled practices, as well as the marginalization and exclusion of Black artists from exhibitions and collections. More recently, museums across the country have been intentional about including or trying to be more inclusive in their storytelling by taking steps to acknowledge, preserve, and interpret Black history. Recognizing this, it's against this backdrop that Pierce Street Gateway seeks to raise awareness of the legacy of the Pierce Street Historic District and its residents through our storytelling, advocacy, leadership, education, partnerships, and innovation. The Gateway hopes to preserve the architectural integrity of the Callaway store while improving its functionality for tourism and community engagement. This space will commemorate the remarkable and ordinary citizens who helped to shape Pierce Street's legacy and ultimately Lynchburg's growth. As the Gateway thinks about remembrance and belonging and what we can do to create community, we ultimately hope to support and promote the revitalization of the Pierce Street Historic District. So every time I walk into the Callaway store, I think about the community it nourished and the lives and families it sheltered. I think about the conversations the store's walls were privy to as we move through the generations. As you look at the hodgepodge of materials used to construct this home, it's not hard to imagine the labor of love that went into it. This home represents 150 years of Lynchburg's Black history, but it's also a symbol of entrepreneurship and ingenuity. Every board, every piece of concrete, the shelves, the old chalkboard, the multitude of bedrooms on the upper floors tell a story of a community hub. 1301 Pierce Street is emblematic of so many Black enclaves around the country and around the city that is representative of a safe space to call home. As the neighborhood changes, Pierce Street Gateway is determined to capture the essence of the community within these walls and to preserve the cultural heritage of the neighborhood to ensure its legacy can be passed down and shared with generations to come. So we're lucky that there's a team supporting our work who's excited about the neighborhood's possibilities. And as we think of executing the vision of Stuart Coleman, who founded the organization, I think about the collective wisdom and passion of our incredible board and our advisory board and our community partners. This work isn't work that can be done in isolation. So we're constantly thinking about new ways to engage with our neighbors, to tell the historic district story and to create a multicultural space that fosters belonging. To that end, the Pierce Street Community Garden was established in 2021 as a partnership between Pierce Street Gateway and Team Big Hearts of Leadership Lynchburg's 45th class. The aim of the Pierce Street Community Garden is to help alleviate food insecurity in the Pierce Street neighborhood and beyond. The garden is located in a food desert, And as we reckon with Remembrance, the garden is a new opportunity to build community as we focus on the principles of food security and sustainable agriculture. The garden is undeniably making an impact. We're in our third planting season, and we know and love our neighbors who make this place so special. With 2 schools in our immediate vicinity and historic markers honoring educators throughout the neighborhood, it was important for us to think about ways that we can weave education into our immediate goals. In partnership with the University of Lynchburg's English department and with the kind help of generous volunteers, we officially opened our free little library this summer. So the library helps to promote literacy, support learning, and increase access to diverse reading materials in our neighborhood. And nothing makes us happier than seeing these books fly off the shelves. So if you have any books that you'd like to donate, we will take those National Geographics that Jeremy doesn't want you to bring here. So please feel free to drop us off with them. Drop them off with us. We're there every Saturday morning from 9 to 11. So as the Gateway prepares to establish a museum and community hub at 1301 Pierce Street, last winter we kicked off phase 1 of the restoration of the Callaway store by painting the store and giving the store a facelift for the holidays. And this fall we hope to put a new metal roof in place before moving ahead with the stabilization of the store. So, I think we have an achievable strategic plan, but I might be biased. So we've got the strategic plan, and the hope is that we're going to be able to save a piece of this neighborhood's history. And so we're in full fundraising mode. We've got an annual fund, and as you can tell from the video, the Callaway store needs a lot of love. It needs to be fully refurbished before we can begin to welcome guests to the store. And so we're working to raise the money necessary to complete this project. So we've got an ambitious 2026 completion date in mind. And at that point, we hope to create a space for an artist in residence and continue with the education programming that we've begun through our partnerships with the Lynchburg City Schools and the Center for Community Engagement at the University of Lynchburg and our other partners and supporters. So I hope I've sparked some consideration about the erasure of Black stories. And as you think about belonging and learning about the totality of the Lynchburg experience, I know you're now really all excited to get involved with the Gateway. And so the garden hosts community volunteers every Saturday morning from 9 to 11 from April through October. On September 30th, we'll celebrate 2 years since the garden opened, so we'll be doing our fall planting on September 30th. So if you think you've got a green thumb or you've got a group of friends with a green thumb, please come hang out with us. We also have free guided tours of the neighborhood, and we offer internship opportunities to students in our area. So as you think about how we expand our awareness of Pierce Street's legacy, communication and connection are 2 of the key principles we're focused on. And social media is where we find a diverse audience to help share the neighborhood story. These platforms are great agents of advocacy, activism, and social change. So if you are on social media, please follow us, like, and share our content. You can find the Pierce Street Community Garden on Instagram and on Facebook, and the Pierce Street Gateway on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. So as we continue to think about remembrance and how we preserve Pierce Street's legacy, we've crafted 3 annual signature events to help engage with our neighbors and our community. The first weekend in April, we kick off spring planting with a neighborhood barbecue. In mid-July, we do a community ice cream social, and then in September, we've got our large fundraiser. The first 2 events are free and open to the public. So we've got our fundraiser next weekend, and the Jazz and Sip coincides with the anniversary of the opening of the garden. And so just like Jerry did, I wanted to invite you all to join us for our Jazz and Sip next weekend. It's going to be September 30th at Amazement Square from 5 to 7:30. Now, if you can't join us for the Jazz and Sip, there are other ways that we can get involved. So storytelling, community growth, and empowering change are parts of Pear Street Gateway's core values. And so if you can't join us next Saturday, you can definitely still support the Gateway through our online auction that opens tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. And we've got amazing things. We've got a Chadwick, and we've got Broadway tickets, and we've got, what else do we have? I spent so much time working on this, my mind is blank. We've got some, there's a Colombian artist, I think we've got 2 of those from Stewart's collection, which are just absolutely fantastic. We've got a staycation from the Virginian. We've got a tour of Court Street with Al Chambers. And we've got a private tour of Poplar Forest with Travis McDonald. So, go to our website. Everything will be on the website tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. for our auction. So I know that the Jones Memorial Library is focused on genealogy and local history and is diligently working to highlight Lynchburg's complex history. And I applaud the library for using their platforms and these lectures to highlight incidents of erasure. As I wrap up and as we refocus on the idea that history is about belonging and celebrate the joy and wonder of those who found it on Pear Street, I want us, those who call this city home, to also reflect on how we tell the stories of the city. Reflect on our personal biases and consider how they explicitly and implicitly show up in our storytelling. How do we view Black Lynchburg residents and their contributions to our little Mecca? In a country deeply divided along racial and political lines, Lynchburg has an opportunity to become a shining example of respect, kindness, and effective, culturally pluralistic leadership, but only if we're willing to do the work. Today, the movement for Black Lives pointedly insists that Black history remains a critical component of social justice agendas. Like their forebears, Black activists, radical demands are resulting in mainstream change. And we see this with the success of the 1619 Project, the commemoration of Black historic figures like Ida B. Wells, the Equal Justices Initiative's lynching memorial in Alabama, and the tireless work of the Emmett Till Memorial Commission in Mississippi, exemplifying the movement towards the recognition and remembrance of Black history and Black belonging. In our community, the work of the Legacy Museum of African American History, the Old City Cemetery, the Ann Spencer House and Gardens, and Thomas Jefferson's Poplar Forest. These are all examples of working towards a more equitable community. I want us to remember that public memory is not just created by scholars and museums and governments. We all bear responsibility for what our nation and our city remembers and forgets. As we think about remembrance, Blackness, and belonging, Pear Street Gateway hopes to use the neighborhood stories to showcase this snapshot of Lynchburg's history as a vehicle for celebration, justice, and reconciliation. When the Gateway Museum and Visitor Center is completed, this facility will weave together a space for art, for the promotion of the arts, historic preservation, and food security through the Pear Street Community Garden. As we work toward revitalizing the strategically important neighborhood and for the rich culture and history of what it represents, I really am inviting you to be a part of our vibrant community. I invite you to please come and discover Pear Street. And thank you all for the invitation to kick off this year's lecture series.
Yes.
I have a question.
Yes.
The name Callaway is pretty significant here in Lynchburg.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any connections to any of the descendants from those Callaways?
We don't.
Okay.
We don't.
Can you rephrase the question?
Oh, I'm sorry. Ramona was asking if we've got any connection to the descendants from the Callaways. We don't. Not yet.
Okay, we might.
I've been scouring the genealogy websites.
Okay,
But yeah.
we might be able to work
Okay.
on that.
Okay.
Just-
Yes. Oh, hold on one
Sorry, I
second.
just want to make a statement.
Yes.
One of the things I think is so important that when you move forward to preserve the history, that you bring along the descendants of those people who represented that piece of that moment
Absolutely.
in time.
Absolutely. I think it's really important that you capture those voices.
Right.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Did you say that you were accepting book donations?
We are.
I'll be in touch.
Yes, I will leave my card with you. We're so serious. The books are going so quickly. The university, it's difficult for the university to keep up. And so we've been taking things out of our own personal libraries and putting them there. Because the university can't keep up with how quickly the books are going.
Do you need children's books?
Yes, we'd love children's books. Any other questions? Should I start picking on people like I do with my students?
Well, I have a question. In terms of the genealogies,
Yes.
are you doing any oral histories?
We are doing oral histories, and it's really exciting. So I'm working with a group of professors on campus, and we just got a grant to start doing the oral histories, and so we kicked that off this fall. Yes, so that is forefront of our plans for the immediate future. Mhm.
How extensive are the repairs needed for the Callaway stores? This is more, I take it, than just a freshening up and a facelift. What's involved with it?
So the Callaway store has a metal roof. The roof has a few leaks, and so the leaks have messed with the foundation. And so the foundation of the store needs to be redone. And so once we're done with the roof, because it doesn't make sense we stabilize before we do the roof. Roofs are expensive in Lynchburg. I don't know if you guys know, but roofs cost upwards of $90,000 if they're metal, which is fascinating to me. So we've got the roof, then we're gonna stabilize. And once we stabilize, we will try to redo the rooms as much as possible to preserve the history. So it's not gonna be pretty. What you walk into is going to be a representation of almost what we see when we walk in there right now. And so when we've done the architectural plan and looking at the spaces, what we've decided is that because we don't want to completely refurbish the house, what we'll do if we want to have big gatherings like this is have an addition. Because, I mean, it's an old house, right? And so we can't have 60 people in a room. And so we'll have the addition, and the rooms in the house, we can do small tours or small exhibits with up to 15 people. It's gonna take a lot of work. It's gonna take a lot of work. I think to refurbish the house alone is about $500,000. Just the house without the addition. It's a lot of money. But historic preservation is always expensive. It's always expensive. So we're fundraising. So I take checks. And I've got a square, so I will take cards too. Yes, Jitsi?
I don't know if I heard this right, but I think you were saying, one of the pictures I saw, you were talking about the Callaway store upstairs having bedrooms.
Yes.
Provided temporary housing for
Yes.
local women or families.
Yes, so the Callaways would rent to different families in the neighborhood, but Amelia Perry Pride also had a home for formerly enslaved women. So women who did not have a place to go when slavery ended. And so some of those women would have stayed. I think there are stories about Otobenga staying in the house as well. And so it really was a home for the community to come together. It was a safe space for a lot of people.
And so it would be, who was funding that? Like, who was sponsoring that?
The Callaways,
Oh, the Callaways.
yes,
Okay.
and then later the Spencers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
I appreciate your vivacious presentation. but I have a question.
Yes.
Between the time that you left, this is more personal
Mhm.
perspective. Between the time that you left Randolph-Macon and then the time that you returned here to Lynchburg, your perceptions probably changed a bit. Can you comment on that?
My perceptions of Lynchburg?
Yes.
No, haven't changed a bit. Haven't changed a bit. I think it is easier for me to navigate now because I've got a PhD and I'm out and about in the community, and so there are a lot of people that know my face, and even if they don't know my face, they know my name. I think at times it can still be difficult to navigate as a Black woman in this city. What I will say is that having had my time in undergrad here, coming back was easier. If I had come into the city as a Black woman now, I would not have stayed. Because in coming back, I had a network. I had a network to come back to. When I came back, I still had professors that I'd been close to when I was at Macon, so Hermana Hendricks and Carla Heath. They were my support system when I came back, and so I jumped right back into the legacy, and there were places that I could go to for support. I think if you're Black and you come to this neighborhood and you don't have, or you come to this town and you don't have support systems, it's difficult.
Thank you.
Yes.
When the signs, historical markers were
Mhm.
put up for Dr. Johnson's house,
Mhm.
and there was another one, there were two at the same, probably C,
Mhm.
at the same time. We were there, my husband and I were
A
there.
big celebration. I saw the
yes,
photos.
It
Yeah.
was, yeah,
Mhm.
it was. And I know there was such a nice, there was food and music, and, we stayed for hours.
Yes.
Are there still events like that?
So that's what we've tried to do. So in April, when we've got our kickoff for planting, there's a big barbecue, and people really do come and stay for hours. So we start at
Okay.
9 and we end at about 1, which for us is usually 2 or 3, and that's always fun. This summer we had a free ice cream social for the entire community, and a lot of people came to that. That just wasn't for the neighborhood, but for Lynchburg, and so a lot of people came to that. We really had a lot of fun, and it was a pay what you can plant sale. So if you could pay $2, that's what you paid. If you could pay nothing, that's what you paid. I think it's really important for us to get out the word that the garden is open and accessible, right? So the garden volunteers come all the time, either me or Sarah, one of our other garden volunteers, is there every Saturday, and we don't miss. And so that's really been a place for us to get to know the neighbors. I think ultimately what we want to be able to do is to turn that space over to the neighborhood, so that we're not managing as much in the day-to-day. And we really, there's a girl on the corner named Haley, and she really has taken an effort. And then around the corner, there's Mandy, who works at the university, and she really has shown an interest in the garden. And so I think the more that we can make the garden a communal space, the more people will come. There are also events at the Ann Spencer House that are constantly happening, and so that's also an opportunity for people to come to the neighborhood. We'll see how it goes. We've got big plans.
Good.
It's gonna take a minute. It's gonna take a minute. Mhm. Any other questions? Yes, Chidsey.
Just one more. I mean, we both teach at the same school, so I just have this question, like, how do you have the energy to do all that and do your job?
I don't. We are faking it completely. I think when you're passionate about some things, you show up, right? It doesn't matter how tired I am. I will give 50 million of these speeches, because it means that even if one of you comes to the neighborhood and walks through and looks at the historic markers and looks at the Callaway store and looks at the Johnson House and the C House and the Ann Spencer House, then I would have made an impact, right? And I think that's the most important thing, to get people into the neighborhood, to raise awareness of the neighborhood. I think the things that you're passionate about, you show up for. And so we're just going to keep showing up until the wheels fall off.
Okay, another one.
Mhm.
With Dr. Johnson's house and the tennis court,
Mhm.
hopefully that's going to bring a lot of visitors.
Yes.
Are you trying to tie in with that as much as
So
possible?
we actually, I'm supposed to hang out with Eva next weekend when he comes to town. So we will have a good chat. Jerry's been having conversations. So what I am trying to do, what's your name?
Peggy?
Peggy, what I am trying to do is to delegate. You know, we are not very good at delegating, and so I am delegating conversations. This is why we have a board, so that I can delegate. So we have had some conversations. I think collaboration is important. And I think what the Gateway wants to do is to be a hub for the neighborhood, to be that one space that introduces everybody, all of the people, the famous people, the not so famous people, to the neighborhood. And so I want to think of it as the neighborhood becoming a museum space. So we're not just going to one place, but we're taking this cultural tour of the entire neighborhood. And I think
That's enough.
yes,
National.
yeah,
That
I
could go
think
national.
right. I think that's my hope for the Gateway and for the collaboration in the neighborhood. Yes.
How does the church fit into all this?
So
Is it a functioning?
the church does function. The church does function. The church does function. And we had a great partnership with the church, and then Reverend Higgins died. And so now we are working on that. Yes, Reverend Higgins died last fall, and it was just heartbreaking. So we're working on it. But the church is functioning, and they let us use their bathrooms from time to time. Because we have no bathrooms at the Callaway store. Yes?
Can you talk about how the Pierce Street Gateway came to be?
So the Pierce Street Gateway comes out of a collaboration with Stuart Coleman and the Spencers. And Stuart grew up in this town. He would always say that even though he'd grown up here and he'd gone to EC Glass, he didn't know much about the neighborhood, right? And so he started doing some research, and he really fell in love with the neighborhood and fell in love with this concept of telling these stories, highlighting the stories in the neighborhood. And so he got together with a group of his friends, and they decided that they were going to he was going to purchase the Callaway store. They were going to start this nonprofit organization, and that's as far as I know. And so the rest is history, I guess.
Who is the he that you're referring to?
Stuart Coleman? Yes, Stuart left us last December. Yes. But he really was the impetus for the Gateway, at least for the Callaway store. Yes, Jerry?
I'll be preaching to the choir to this audience, but I want to tell you to please take anyone who ever visits this town to Pierce Street. I teach courses over at Randolph College. I teach courses on public history. I bring students from this town who have never been to Pierce Street. That's no judgment about the teachers and so forth, but some of the students, particularly the African American students, almost are resentful that they don't know this history. How could I be 20 years old and not know that this happened? Of course, they think 20 years old because that's their point of view. I said, well, you know it now. You're beginning to know it. And to understand the whole history of this country, you can start right here on that plot. Ann Spencer House, or Rowan Johnson House, all the signs that are there, the stories that are there. And so there are other places. When visitors come here, they want to go to Athletics Courthouse, that's fine. Poplar Forest, of course. But please, especially young people, take them to Pierce Street, walk down those streets, visit the Ann Spencer House, read the signs, think about what that street represents.
Yes.
I'm just sitting here and I'm always remembering exactly the seat I was in, freshman intro to poetry, Norton anthology, to open the page, and there she was in Lynchburg, Virginia, and I had never heard of her. And is it possible that I was born in this town, have lived in this town my whole life, and here I sit, and we've got a woman who's part of the Harlem Renaissance, and I've never heard of it. And I still remember the answer she gave me. So I live in Lynchburg. And I thought, well,
Right, so it comes down to whose stories get told, right? Whose stories get told and whose stories get erased.
it was etched, it still is etched in my mind. And the thing I always bring up, and I have gotten booed off social media, but I'll probably continue to try. Heritage High School ought to be Ann Spencer High School. It is unthinkable that this town would have a woman who was a lifetime librarian of her school and internationally renowned poet. And to my knowledge, the only thing that's named for her in this city, my city, is her own house. I gotta say it, I think if she were a male, a white male, with such a background, she'd have a bridge, a school, I don't know what she's
To follow up on that comment, right, so Ann Spencer was the librarian at the Dunbar branch, and we are looking through our history at the library to do an exhibit about the Dunbar branch because it's 100 years in 2024. It's the 100th anniversary. So look for that exhibit in January, and I'm going to UVA tomorrow to talk about, they're doing an exhibit about Ann Spencer. So it's all good stuff. So thank you all for coming. We're going to end it here, but please feel free to come up and have a conversation with Dr. Lewis individually, one-to-one, and please help yourself also to cookies and lemonade at the back.
Thank you.